Talking about inequality in South Africa, the first thing that comes to the minds of many is the inequality between individual races. While that is true, South Africa is doing much better than it has been doing before and has applied many effective reforms since apartheid has ended. I will be doing three things in this presentation. First, I will take a look at the levels of inequality on different global politics levels. Second, I will be taking a look at the effect of implementation of righteous proposed measures in South Africa. And third, I will be looking at this issue from different internal relations and critical theories. So, on the global and international level, South Africa holds the 119th place in the terms of GDP per capita. Therefore, it is quite behind in the terms of the global context. But in the terms of the regional level, South Africa holds the seventh highest GDP per capita in Africa, which has over 40 countries. So in the terms of Africa as a region, it is actually doing quite well. Now, when we take a look at the national level, we can see that 60% of people in South Africa live on less than $7,000 a year, whereas the richest 2% in Africa live on at least $50,000 per year. So there is quite a discrepancy between the individual social groups. Moreover, there is quite a discrepancy between the individual races, as white people own 70% of the land in South Africa, although they make roughly about 8% of the population. Then on the local level, there is an issue in South Africa in the terms of inequality between big cities, such as Cape Town, and the rural areas, because capital, technology, know-how, work opportunities are all accumulated in these big cities, and they are being drained from these rural areas, which is seen on the fact that a lot of people from these rural areas are trying to migrate into these bigger cities for better job opportunities. So there is a discrepancy between individual locations in South Africa. Moreover, there is also a discrepancy in the terms of individual communities on the community level. That is to say, if you take, for example, a community of African American workers, they in between themselves do not have such a high level of income inequality. But if you take communities of African American workers and Caucasian landowners, which live in the same place, there is a lot of inequality between those individual groups, as the Caucasian group has a lot higher income. So overall, the level of inequality in South Africa is perceived as something that is very bad. But some people might say that on the other hand, South Africa is actually doing quite well. For example, from 1991 to 1996, the median wage of the middle class of Caucasians has risen by 15%, and the same thing has happened by 78% for the African American middle class. So we can see that there is a gap, but this gap could be slowly closing. Now, when we're talking about the measures that are implemented in this country, so firstly, let's look on like policy reform and the effect of lobbying when compared to the United States. The United States is like the epitome of lobbying, as rich individuals spend tens of billions of dollars every year to lobby the government. On the other hand, in South Africa, a reform has been passed just recently that states that the government can take land from white farmers without giving them any compensation, which is interesting because the white group or the Caucasian group in South Africa is the powerful group with the most money, but policies are being passed against it. So we can see that lobbying does not have such an effect in Africa. But someone else might say that it actually does, but just from a different source, and that is the international community. Because international organizations and corporations have pressured South Africa to privatize most of its state-owned businesses under the blanket statement saying that it actually will provide more efficiency. While it has done that, at the same time, it has only increased the inequality because rich individuals have acquired these companies and are profiting off of them now. Then secondly, at the point, let's talk about minimum wage. The minimum wage in America is currently $7.25 per hour at the federal level, but it's usually higher at the individual state levels. In South Africa, just recently, the federal minimum wage has been implemented for the first time, which has been set at the level of approximately $1.4 per hour. While this might sound very little to you, when you take into account the purchasing power that the people have with this amount of money in South Africa, it is actually something around $4 per hour. So it's still comparatively lower to the United States, but it is not as bad as one might think when he takes the first glance. Lastly, I would like to talk about Reich's proposal of education, of investing into education, and again compared to America. In America, roughly 3 to 4% of the budget is being spent on education. In South Africa, it's roughly 20% of the budget. So we can see that South Africa actually spends large amounts of money into its educational budget. So we could say that comparatively, it has like a more focused or better built educational system than America. Others might say that this is not really true, as 27% of sixth graders in South Africa currently are illiterate, and the same group of students coming just from the wealthiest classes have only a 4% illiteracy between them. So there is still a lot of issues that have to be overcome, and there is still a lot of discrepancy in the terms of inequality. But overall, South Africa is investing more into education relatively from its whole budget than America is. With that being said, we can see that righteous measures are being more or less implemented. We will see how effective they will be, as most of them have been implemented just recently. Now let's take a look at this issue from the point of view of different international relations theories. Let's firstly look at realism. What realism really doesn't have a strong view on this point, because it mainly focuses on international or like interstate relations. But it says that international organizations should not exercise its power over South Africa. So when the World Bank dictates it or tells it to privatize its companies, realists would condemn that action. But otherwise, they would not really have a strong opinion on it. Liberalists believe in equal rights and inequality, so they would in general think that this type of inequality is bad and would offer structural reforms to resolve it. Moreover, they would actually propose the measures that are being taken by the international community and by World Bank to privatize the companies in South Africa, because it can give you economic growth. And moreover, it just promotes the cooperation, because it says that the individual states and these companies are interdependent. And while realists might say that those companies infringe, or those organizations infringe upon the sovereignty of South Africa, liberalists would say that in order to actually preserve sovereignty, which you will have more of when you will be better economically off, you should be cooperating with these organizations and with other states. Lastly, I would like to take a look at this from the point of Marxists and constructivists. So firstly, Marxists would condemn the inequality that is going on and would not be satisfied with the current structural reforms that are being imposed. They would be for a complete revolution, because even if everyone were to be equal based on a structural reform, Marxists still oppose the concept of private property, as they believe that it infringes upon the human dignity, which they think is intrinsic to the human condition. So Marxists would condemn the situation and be for a revolution. And constructivists would not really form an opinion on how to resolve the issue, because they are mainly just talking about how the issue looks and what's its origin. Therefore, they would be talking about how the issues that currently permeate through South Africa are mainly caused by its historical context. That is to say, the apartheid that has been there from 1948 to 1994 and it will basically show how this form of historical governance has been shaping the current situation in Africa. That is why in South Africa, that is why you have the Caucasian people that have higher wealth than African Americans. With all that being said, I would like to thank you for your attention.